And welcome back, everyone, to Prospect 101 podcast. Wow, fellas, what a weekend. What a weekend. It was incredible for the NFL draft and a lot of changes, but I know, at least for me, I was thoroughly entertained.
Dude, I watched all 7 rounds. Didn't miss one pick, I think. Even when the last 2 rounds were on, I took the TV outside because I had to get outside, being dormant for the last 3 days, and I just started watching outside. It was a fun time.
It was cool, man. I went down to Pastell's house for the week and just kind of hung out. We caught a lot of the draft, and it was one of the most fun drafts I can remember in a while. Now, obviously, it was probably more fun than it normally would have been because we haven't had sports in a couple months now, and this is the first real thing we've had. But I thought it was great. I thought the draft being remote was really cool. I thought seeing everybody at their house and how everything was set up was really neat. And obviously, there was some funny moments along the way from people's families and just stuff like that on players and the coaches side. So it was good. It was a nice welcome distraction.
That's right. How awkward, by the way, was Roger Goodell all weekend? I've never seen someone look so uncomfortable, and then he doesn't want any part of being part of the spotlight.
Is it just me?
It amazes me.
It looked like he was changing every 5 picks. Like he was downgrading from a suit to where he was just in jeans and a t-shirt, I think, at the end.
Yeah, I didn't get it. I didn't understand. I totally get him doing the first round. I wish they probably should have had somebody a little more charismatic there for the second and third round. And of course, the last day you didn't need it, but it was interesting. But fellas, just want to get your thoughts on a little bit more detail on how the draft went before we get into our draft grades. But for me, I thought everything, considering everything that's going on with COVID and everything being remote, I was blown away not only at the production value that we got from ESPN, ABC, and all the partners at the NFL, but I thought that the breakdown was extremely well. To me, if I hadn't watched the NFL draft so much in my life, I really wouldn't have known that this was so out of the ordinary because I thought they did such a great job.
They knocked it out of the park. The production value is fantastic. Honestly, everything but them being in one physical location was pretty much the same. The highlight packages were the same. Mel Gel was breaking down everything like he normally does. Bucky Brooks, all those guys. And the only thing that was really unique about it was that you had a cross branding of sorts with the NFL Network and ESPN kind of joining up and doing, each guy being on separate channels and stuff. So, but other than that, it was really the same. There was really not a lot of difference other than, them not being able to walk across the stage.
Yeah, but that right there was the emotional attachment I think fans come to love about the draft. Was see them cry in the green room, hug the commissioner, and then go talk to Deion Sanders afterwards, and kind of just prying out that raw emotion in the moment, and we didn't really get that. There's a few players that we saw kind of cry. I'm not saying every player needs to cry, but we didn't really get to see that raw emotion that we normally see at the draft, and that's probably the one part that it sucked missing. But like Glessner said, it was such a awesome production that if you never watched the draft, you never knew that was a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about it. And all things considered, that's where I thought they did a great job, and they did what they could. With what they had, I thought that they did a really good job of having all the prospects kind of ready to go, like all the guys sitting in their room with their families. Sometimes the timing never quite matched up, which I thought was interesting. But as far as the highlights, now the only bone I'll pick about the coverage was, can I get more highlights? Right, I thought in round 1 and round 2 and 3, it was all of these kind of emotional stories, which I get. You got to have those about somebody's dad dying when he's 5 years old. I get you need that kind of stuff. I think that there's actually a really good opportunity for one of the networks next year. I hope ESPN does it, but a lot like they do the coaches' film room for the national championship and the national semifinal. I think they should do that for the NFL draft and have every prospect ready to go with 2 to 3 more minutes of film and really have coaches breaking them down, not just scouts. I think there's a massive opportunity in that because, guys, I'll log in to watch that. That's fascinating to me. There's not enough film for me.
Gless, do it.
I know.
This is you. This is all you.
This is
Gless.
the opportunity. We needed to do this
know.
next year.
Hey,
No,
do we
that's-
have investors out there? Where's Mel? Can I contact Mel? I'll get Mel on the show.
That's a fantastic idea, though, Gless. I never really thought about that, but yeah, like they do with the college football playoff, where they have all the all 22 film and the views like that, or the coaches breakdown. That would be fantastic.
Well, because there's just not enough film.
Yeah.
Like they'll show like 2 or 3 highlights, and then of course it's like everybody's good highlights too. Like it's not the bad highlights. Like
Yep.
like I would have loved to seen like 10 minutes of Isaiah Simmons, right? Like I'd love to see like 2 minutes at safety, 2 minutes as a rush end, 2 minutes as an inside backer. Like guys like that are so fascinating to me, and it's just there's just not enough time because they're trying to get commercial breaks in. So I think it's an opportunity for ESPN to do it next year. NFL Network maybe could probably do it. I'd like to see ESPN do it personally. Yeah. I'm not a big fan of the NFL Network coverage, but that's just personal opinion. Where'd you guys watch it? Did you guys watch ESPN? Did you watch ABC or NFL Network?
I love the ABC coverage with the College Game Day crew. You had Reese Davis, David Pollock, Desmond Howard, Maria Taylor. Like, to me, that's the best. I think that's personally the best draft coverage on ABC of the first couple nights. You know, I'm not a big Trey Wingo guy, so watching ESPN's tough. Watching their coverage is a little tough for me.
I think it's a loyalty thing. I got to watch Mel Kiper. So I just feel bad if I go to NFL Network, you know? Like, until he dies, like, that's probably going to be my go-to guy for information. Now, I definitely mixed it up at the end. I started watching ABC, just to mix it up. I don't know how people watch one group of guys for 7 rounds straight, 3 days worth.
Yeah.
So by round like 5 and 6, I changed it to ABC.
Yeah, I didn't catch as much on day 3. I think I watched the majority of the 4th round, about half of the 5th, and then I went for a walk around here and kind of had it on in the background, but I was keeping tabs on it. So I guess I watched ESPN on Friday night. I was hanging out with a buddy of mine, and we were watching it together, eating some pizza. So I think it was ESPN all the way through because I'm with you, Pastell. I'm a big Mel Kiper guy. So I feel a lot of loyalty there. So anyways, fellas, let's go ahead and get into it. Let's get into why the fans tune into us, right? They want to hear us break down the draft. So, those listening out there, what we're going to do, going to kind of cover, who we thought had the best drafts and why, who had the worst, some first round reaches and steals, and then we'll end just kind of the entire draft, maybe our best steal, and then the biggest reach in all the drafts. So, Kenny, let me go ahead and start with you. As far as drafts are concerned, from rounds 1 through 7, what are some teams that you felt like had the best drafts and why?
My best overall draft, I think, was the Denver Broncos for me personally. And the reason I say that is I think of, what they were as a team and what they struggled with last year. And obviously that was a offensive perspective. What they did to build around Drew Lock was phenomenal. They took Jerry Jeudy, who was arguably the number 1 receiver on most people's boards. It was really between him and CeeDee Lamb. He fell to him at 15. Then they took KJ Hamler, who is going to be a tremendous addition alongside Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton and Noah Fant. So all of a sudden you start projecting out who Denver has surrounded Drew Lock with, and then you add in the tight end they took from Missouri, who was Drew Lock's teammate at Missouri in college, and then one of the most athletic tight ends in the entire draft. They picked up a center, Lloyd Cushenberry from LSU. They picked up some great pieces on defense. Cornerback from Iowa, Justin Strnad from Wake Forest. I mean, I just like what they did. I like where they're heading because their defense has always been really good. It's always been pretty elite. You got guys like Von Miller. You got Bradley Chubb, who'll be coming back from the ACL injury this year. Their defense has always been on point. That wasn't the problem last year. Last year was offense. They couldn't score. They couldn't move the ball. And now you have one of the most young, exciting prospects in the game, and you're giving him a plethora of weapons to throw to. I think their arrow's pointing up, and I think they hit a home run in this draft. In my opinion, it was the best draft out of all the teams.
I actually, in the list of my best drafts, the Broncos were certainly on that list. And when I get in my list, I'll explain pretty similar to what you were saying, Kenny. But Pastell, you don't have to go very far from your fandom to say who had the best draft in your opinion. Go ahead.
I mean, is there any doubt? It's the Cincinnati Bengals. And it's because you got a game-changing, franchise-changing player. And that's in Joe Burrow. I mean, that pick alone, I don't think you can overhype that if it works out, because that changed the trajectory of the Cincinnati Bengals franchise. You got rid of the Andy Dalton era, and now you got the Joe Burrow era. You've already seen in free agency how they have picked up their game as far as actually going out and attacking and getting some of these bigger free agents. And now I think you see a rejuvenated fan base to back up Cincinnati, to want to see them go out and win and compete for championships. So not only did they get the game-changing quarterback, they got a guy in T. Higgins falling to them in the second round, which arguably was the fifth best receiver in the draft and should have been picked in the first round. So, and the biggest other need outside of quarterback, you're probably looking at linebacker. They got 3 linebackers in this draft. And not everyone needs the hit. Honestly, if one of the 3, Logan Wilson, Akeem Davis-Gaither, or Marcus Bailey, if any of those guys work out, the Cincinnati Bengals defense just got that much better, to include the additions they got in free agency. So I think purely from a picking the best player available and also attacking a couple of needs, Cincinnati Bengals hit a home run. And it begins, as cliche as it sounds, it begins with the first pick of the draft. It's a lazy pick, but it's the truth. It's the best draft in the NFL.
Yeah, I thought that the first linebacker they took out of Wyoming was certainly an interesting one. Certainly not one that was high on my radar. It was really kind of the first time I really heard of the guy. I mean, kind of a smaller school in regards to impact players. I thought that maybe they could have gotten better value there linebacker wise. I mean, there are a pretty deep linebacker class, and so I thought that one kind of took me a little bit by surprise. But to your point, I think coming into the draft, T. Higgins was in my top 3 receivers, and to get him at the beginning of the second round. So not only do you match up, not only do you get Joe Burrow, but you get him that deep vertical threat down the field, that red zone threat. And make no bones about it, Cincinnati is going to be pretty scary from a skill position perspective next year.
Yeah, and just to go really quick back on that linebacker you're talking about. So Logan Wilson, 6'2", 241 pounds, out of Wyoming, 3 years of pure production. Did not leave the field. Every year he's collecting over 100 yards or 100 tackles. But did you know he was a defensive back in high school and came to Wyoming as that, and they converted him into a linebacker? So the best part about Logan Wilson in today's NFL, this is why I think it was such a good pick, is you need more guys that can cover at that position.
Hybrid guys. Yep.
So the fact that he's probably one of the more elite, if not the most elite, linebacking coverage linebacker in this draft. There's some other things you would like to see him do, like shed blocking better, which is probably why he didn't get picked that high. But from a coverage standpoint, he's phenomenal, and then from a production standpoint, he's phenomenal. So I think Wyoming hurt him because that's where he played. But I think if you had a guy like that at LSU, he'd be a first-round pick.
Yeah. Interesting. So I kind of get into mine. So I'll echo both of you guys. I thought the Bengals were certainly in the top 5 of who I thought had a really good draft. Denver Broncos, just as Kenny covered a little bit earlier, what they did skill position wise, I think immediately skyrockets them and makes them a fringe playoff team. There's no doubt in my mind now. It's really all in Drew Lock at this point, because he's certainly going to have the weapons. So 2 teams that really stuck out to me. First, guys, the Carolina Panthers. I absolutely love what they did on the defensive side of the ball. Matt Rule just came in there, surprisingly for an offensive guy, because his first, actually the entire draft is filled with defensive players. They did not draft.
They didn't pick one offensive player.
They did not pick one offensive player. 1, 2, 3. They had 2 seconds, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th. All defensive players. I'm going to go through some of these guys that I really like. Obviously, Derek Brown, an outstanding defensive tackle prospect, and his film is unbelievable. I watched a lot of Auburn during the year, and I knew he was good, but some of that film that they were showing is outstanding, and the athleticism there. Interesting, I actually think he's a better edge rusher than they took in round 2. Yoder Gross Matos. From our high school, fellas, Chancellor High School in Spotsylvania, Virginia.
Represent.
I'm not big on him as a pass rusher. I think he's going to be a solid defensive end pro, right? He's going to be a guy that plays the run well. He's very technically sound. He'll get his, he may get 5-6 sacks a year. I don't see him being a dominant edge rush prospect, but he's a guy that's going to anchor that defensive line for the next 5 years and be a really solid player. So I think at round 2, and that's the one thing as a note that I thought that this draft was missing were a lot of really good edge rushers aside from Chase Young. I think you had Chase Young, and then I think you kind of had everyone else. So I think he's going to be solid. Somebody I'm really excited about what they got is Jeremy Chin, safety out of Southern Illinois. Not sure how this guy got to the FCS level. This guy's an absolute stud, and he's a monster. He's a physical freak. I think he is going to fit in that defense quite nicely. Kenny Robinson, obviously safety, us being formerly an XFL show. I think Kenny Robinson's a fantastic pick. To get him at round 5, I thought was an absolute steal. They have the offense there in Carolina together. I heard a Matt Rule interview yesterday. They said, hey, we really addressed the offense in free agency. We wanted to attack the defense in the draft. And I thought that they hit a home run on a lot of these hits. They got tons of value in a lot of these picks as well. Like I said, with Kenny Robinson, Jeremy Chin. So really love what they did there. Another team that I really love what they did is the Arizona Cardinals. I thought what they did in the first round, they got the biggest steal in the first round, getting Isaiah Simmons to fall to them at 8. It's an absolute no-brainer. From a versatility standpoint, the best player in the draft, as he can play multiple positions on defense. Round 2, guys, they traded their second-round pick for DeAndre Hopkins. So if you factor that into the draft, I think that's pretty good. Round 3, get Josh Jones. Josh Jones, tackle out of Houston. A lot of people had a first-round grade on him. So you get that tackle to help protect Kyler Murray. And then you start to get in day 3, and they shored up the defensive line. Leaky Fotu out of Utah. Utah is one of the best defenses in the country, and Fotu was a big reason why. And then Rashard Lawrence, defensive tackle out of LSU. So I thought they did a lot of really great things on all 3 days. So I really like what the Arizona Cardinals did. I think that they're going to be a force in the West. I think the West, the NFC West in particular, may be the best division in football when you take into account Arizona Cardinals are kind of on the rise. You have the Los Angeles Rams, who aren't far removed from a Super Bowl appearance. Seattle Seahawks, who are always a solid program and are always going to be in the playoff conversation. And, of course, the San Francisco 49ers, who went to the Super Bowl last year. So,
yep.
I thought Arizona did a lot to improve their stock in the West.
Yeah, they did a phenomenal job, and the pieces they're putting around Kyler are going to be fantastic. And what they're doing, with obviously getting Isaiah Simmons and shoring up the defense and the offensive line with guys like Josh Jones and a couple other guys that they brought in, their stock is rapidly rising. And if Kyler can take the next step and not hit a sophomore slump, they're probably a borderline wild card team. So it's going to be fun to watch them this year. They're going to be exciting.
Yeah, and Gless, I'm going to go back to Carolina real quick. I think looking at their draft and the players that they picked, I can potentially see almost up to 5 starters in this draft that can come out of here, right? And I think a successful draft, let's be honest, when you go back in draft history and you go back into the 2017 draft, I bet you most of y'all's teams out there, you look at that draft, you probably have 1 or 2 starters from that draft. Probably 3 or 4 guys that aren't even with your team anymore. So I think if you can get a draft where you get potentially 3 starters, that's a good draft. And I think the first 3 picks, Derek Brown, Matos, and Shin, are they're guaranteed starters almost immediately too. And then you guys like Troy Pride Jr. and Kenny Robinson, a couple of developmental prospects that I can see starting as well. So I love the pick with Carolina.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so let's go. Go ahead, Kenny.
No, I was just going to say they were on a short list of some of the best drafts for me as well. So yeah, I think that's a pretty universal take.
Well, with the good comes the bad. So, just like anything, I want to kind of touch base on, teams that we felt like had a less successful draft. So I think, Pastor, I think you bring up a great point. A great draft are when you draft starters, right? Because, you obviously want an impact player in rounds 1 and 2, but really you make your team up rounds 3 through 7. So if you can find starters in rounds 3 through 7, I think, to your point, I think that's when you call a really successful draft. So let's cover kind of some of those drafts where we don't feel like they got a lot of starters out of it. So why don't we switch it up here, Pastel? Why don't you go ahead and lead us off on maybe your team or two you thought that had a less than optimal draft?
Yeah, so I'm going to say somebody that had 2 first-round picks, which is a shame. That's the Las Vegas Raiders. I know a lot of people love Henry Ruggs, and I think there's a lot of people that don't actually like him. I think he's a good receiver if he's in the right fit, and that fit, I mean, I think he's coming in there as the number 1 receiver. I don't know if he is a true number 1 receiver. And then they reached on a player named Damon Arnett from Ohio State. I mean, there was probably, on my board, probably 6 corners that were ranked higher than him. I think he was an early third, maybe late second round pick where he should have been picked, but getting him at 19 overall, probably not the best pick. And then you got somebody, Lynn Bowden Jr. from Kentucky. I know a lot of people love his athleticism and what he did at Kentucky, but it's another reach pick. And it's like the history of Las Vegas is boom or bust. And how many times do they actually boom? I would argue there's more bust than boom. So they just continue that history of picking players that, yeah, they were awesome in college or they had the potential at the combine, but when did they really work out? Like, I don't know what Lynn Bowden, I guess he's going to be kind of maybe like a Randall L type of player, hopefully, best case scenario. The one pick I do like in this whole draft is their last pick, Amik Robertson from Louisiana Tech. That dude's got probably the most natural ball skills at corner. The problem with him, he's only 5'8". But from a team that needed players and they couldn't miss on their top end talent because of that Khalil Mack trade, I think they missed.
Yeah, it was very interesting to see them take 3 receivers so early. I can't remember the last time I've seen a team take 3 receivers with the first 4 picks, especially as early as those 4 picks were. So I do agree with you. I think Ruggs was a little bit of a reach because we had talked about prior to the draft. I think Ruggs is a guy who would fit better where you already have an established one, which, you know, they have Darren Waller. I get it, but he's a tight end. I just didn't feel like the value was there at 12 for Ruggs. And I like Lynn Bowden. I think he's a great pick, to be honest. He's my favorite pick of their draft. I think he's going to be a super dynamic playmaker. I think he's a guy they're going to line up all over the place. Like you said, very reminiscent of Antoine Randall L. But I think he's a legit receiver, too. I think he's a better receiving prospect than Randall L was. Randall L was a quarterback who switched over to receiver. This is a guy who was a receiver who was forced to play quarterback in the senior year in college this year because of injuries, and he excelled at it. I mean, he won a bowl game. He showed what kind of playmaker he was. Teams knew he couldn't throw the football, and they still couldn't stop him. So to me, that says a lot about the athlete he is and what he's going to be able to bring that offense. But I do agree. I think overall the Raiders definitely missed on this draft.
Yeah, and just real quick, just kind of another team or two that I really didn't like their draft. The Giants, because I think they reached for Andrew Thomas at the 4th overall pick. I think at that pick, you got to get a game-changing prospect. I don't care if Andrew Thomas was a need or not. You pick an Isaiah Simmons or you pick somebody that could change, not the franchise, but that team, be an instant impact starter. And the other team I didn't really care for was the Buffalo Bills. Buffalo Bills, they got a good second-round pick in A.J. Epineza from Iowa, but Zach Moss, decent running back. Everybody else, maybe they're backups. The only other instant starter is Tyler Bass from Georgia Southern, the place kicker, who probably was the best kicker in the draft. But Jake Fromm was an interesting pick.
You don't like the Fromm number? I think it's good value in round 5.
Great value, but for the Buffalo Bills, where it's kind of more cold weather, windy, you need a guy probably with a little bit stronger of an arm, which is probably why Josh Allen has worked out so well in Buffalo. But you're going to get a guy that has more anticipation throws. Playing in Buffalo, I just don't know if that's a great fit. I think great value, just bad fit.
Yeah. Kenny, how about you? As you know, there are a couple of these teams that Pastel mentioned that were on my list, but why don't you kind of add on to that on our list of worst drafts?
Yeah, so I had 3 that really stood out to me. I had the Eagles, who I thought had a bad draft, and by the way, I love Jalen Hurts. I love who he is as a player. That's not really a knock on why. It is a knock that they picked him on why I think they had a bad draft, because I think in the second round, I just didn't think they needed that pick. But as a prospect, I actually love Jalen Hurts. I think he's going to be a successful one for a quarterback. I love his mentality. I love his makeup. I just thought it was a bad fit for the Eagles there. I had the Bears as well. I think the Bears have 6 or 7, 8, 9 tight ends now on their roster, and they picked another one in the
10.
second
Yeah,
round.
they have 10.
Yeah,
Yeah, they
10.
got 10 total.
What are you doing? You have 10 tight
Yeah.
ends, and you just picked one in the second round 3 years ago, and Adam Sheen, and now you're picking another one. Like that's to me, that's just I don't know what the GM Pace is thinking, but clearly he wasn't. But to me, I thought the worst draft, in my opinion, and it's just so ironic because I spent all night after day one defending their pick against people who were like, "Oh, that's a bad pick. That's a bad pick." And I was like, "Well, no, you don't pass on a franchise quarterback when he's on the board." And I still agree with that statement, but I thought the Green Bay Packers had the worst draft, and I hate it because it sounds like I'm piling on with everybody else, and it's not even necessarily because of the Jordan Love pick, although it's hard for me to defend it now knowing what they did the rest of the draft. After night one, I said, "Hey, they had a franchise guy on the board. He was their guy. He's a guy who can, very similar to Aaron Rodgers, sit for 2 or 3 years behind, like Rodgers did with Favre, sit behind, learn. He's raw, and then when Rodgers is ready to go, because he'll be 36. He's 36 this year. He'll be 37, 30. Father Time is undefeated. When he's ready to move on, they have their guy in the wings. Yeah, Tom Brady's the only guy who seems the TB12 method is the only one who can fight back. But
That's right.
there's only one Tom Brady, and so I like that pick. But then you follow it up with the running back out of Boston College, A.J. Dillon, when you already have Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones on the roster. I don't get that. He's not going to be an impact guy right off the bat. And he's a very old school running back. He's very physical. He's a big guy. I like his size and speed combination if this was 2001. But it's not. It's 2020, and there's no way if you have running backs already that you already have 2 solid running backs, that this guy's your second round pick, especially when you just picked a quarterback who's not even going to play probably for 2 or 3 years, barring injury or a complete just erosion of Aaron Rodgers' talents. So you've done nothing to really help your offense there. Okay, yeah, maybe you added a piece. Then you add Josiah DeGuara out of Cincinnati in the 3rd round, who's more of an H-back type of guy. I don't think he's really going to be a game-breaking tight end for this team. I don't think he's going to be a huge playmaker, and tight ends are notoriously slow starters as rookies anyway. There's just, for a team that was 1 win away from the Super Bowl, they did nothing to help themselves win now. Yeah, I like some of their stuff for the future, but to me, I thought they missed, with what was on the board, they missed a lot, and again, it's very popular to get on them because of the Jordan Love pick. To be honest, it's not even because of the Jordan Love pick. I thought their second round pick, A.J. Dillon, was a horrendous pick and just a luxury pick that they didn't need. I get drafting best player available in most cases, but it almost feels like Matt LaFleur is trying to remake this team into almost an older school team, and I just don't know. I don't know where it's going to fit. To be honest, I just don't.
Yeah,
see
I'm
it.
not. Yeah, a couple of things I'll kind of play off of what you said, Kenny. So one, I'm not sure they really need a retooling, right? I think that they need, some more weapons on offense, and I'm not sure that they got the weapons, right? To your point, very old school running back. They already a decent, they have a decent stable running backs there already. So that was a little bit of a head scratcher. Now I will say this: when go back to Philadelphia Eagles for a second. They may have reached for Hurts in the second round. I think they probably could have got him in the 3rd. But here's what I'll say. If there was one team that Hurts fit in well with, it was Philadelphia Eagles. Yep. Right? Scheme-wise, it's the perfect fit. Oklahoma, they run so much RPO with the run game. And in Philadelphia, they love to run the RPO game. So if there was a scheme fit there, that was the fit. I think Jalen Hurts goes anywhere else, he's going to struggle immensely. Here, he gets to play behind Carson Wentz with probably the ability to get some reps because Wentz, for being, I think, what's Wentz, 27 years old?
Yeah.
He's pretty old, 27 years old, very, very banged up and already. He has knee issues. He has back issues. Now he has a concussion problem. I think the Eagles in round 2 knew that they had a quarterback issue, right? Not saying that Hurts is ever going to overtake Wentz when healthy, because I don't think he can. I think Wentz is the better player, but you have to have an insurance policy, and you have to have a guy in there that when you get into a playoff game, like what just happened, that you don't have 40-year-old Josh McCown coming off the bench, right? You need a guy who can run your system, run what you want to do, and that's why I think that the Jalen Hurts pick from a scheme fit. It may be the best fit from a quarterback perspective that we saw in the draft, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
my gripe wasn't necessarily
Go ahead.
with the Jalen Hurts pick. I love Jalen Hurts. It was more or less I didn't like their first round pick in Jalen Reagor with what was on the board, and then you followed up with Jalen Hurts maybe a little early. But yeah, you're right, Gless. From a scheme fit perspective, he fits into that offense perfectly. And Doug Peterson and Doug Peterson's a very creative play caller, so I'm sure he'll find ways to use them. Overall, I wasn't a huge fan of the Eagles draft as a whole.
Sure. All right, I'll go into my worst real quick. I know we spent a bunch of time on it. Real quick, a team that wasn't mentioned, I think the Tennessee Titans had a poor draft. First round, Isaiah Wilson. I thought that was a massive reach at 29. Big guy, 6'6", 350. But I think that he's a project, and I think that he's going to take some time in order to develop there. So not a huge pick at that, especially at 29. Pretty close to being a Super Bowl team last year. I don't think that they helped their team. Round 3, their second round pick, I really like Christian Fulton at LSU. So I thought that was the only saving grace in the draft for them. I thought that the Evans kid out of App State was a massive reach in round 3. If you're going to get a running back, I'm not sure that's the guy that you want there. I thought that there was a lot of other better running backs on the board. They took that. And then kind of a head scratcher, took an edge rusher in 5. I thought that's quite average. And then in round 7, they took 2 quarterbacks. They did take my boy Cole McDonald out of Hawaii, so I did like that.
Love
Run
it.
and shoot guy, pretty good athlete, but they took 2 of them. Kind of a head scratcher there. So aside from Fulton, I thought that all of their picks were questionable at best. So I would have liked to seen a team that was on the cusp of a Super Bowl have a little bit better of a draft in order to improve their stock and to try to get into the Super Bowl for next season. So a little disappointed about what they did there in Tennessee. So we'll go now, kind of the next 2 sections here, guys. We have it down here in our prep. The steals and reach for the first round and then the entire draft. So, Kenny, why don't we start off with you, the first round reach and then your first round steal of the draft?
Yeah, my first round reach was, I kind of alluded to it earlier, is Jalen Reagor with what was on the board. You had Justin Jefferson, you had Brandon Ayuk, you had Michael Pittman, guys like that who were still on the board. T. Higgins, guys in my opinion were all ranked higher on my board than Jalen Reagor. And not that I think Jalen Reagor is a bad prospect, but taking him at 21 in my opinion was a massive reach. The guy is a supreme athlete. He's 5'11", 195. He's on the smaller side, but he's an absolute burner. He can get up the field. His vertical receiving is elite. But here's the thing: his worst traits are his drops. He has extreme lapses in concentration and doesn't have a very great catch radius. It's very limited. And like you said, you put the drops in there. You know who he reminds me of? The guy they just got rid of, Nelson Aguilar. That's who Jalen Reagor is, who they just ran out of town because he couldn't catch a cold. And now you're bringing in a guy who's got a very similar skill set and who has the exact same issues with drops. I don't get that. I don't understand why you're replacing Nelson Aguilar with Nelson Aguilar 2.0 when you with especially with Justin Jefferson, who was taken with the very next pick by the Vikings, right there, a guy who's probably one of the most polished receivers in the draft, and one of the guys who's one of the most tenacious receivers in the draft. I just think with the receivers that were on the board, they could have waited to even the 3rd round to pick a receiver. This was such a receiver-heavy draft. They could have addressed it later. Taking Jalen Reagor, to me, was a massive reach. Now, my biggest steal was, I think it was the easiest one in the first round, Isaiah Simmons. Isaiah Simmons probably should have gone 3, if not 4 to the Giants or to the Lions. So I think that they
Just reached.
I think they reached on it and they passed on the best prospect in the draft. And the Cardinals, obviously, you had the quarterbacks go, and I get that. Some quarterbacks are always going to take precedent over, much quote unquote might be the best prospect in the draft. But Isaiah Simmons should have never fell to 8. Should have
Yeah.
never done it. Anybody who didn't take a quarterback, outside of maybe Chase Young and the Redskins, definitely overestimated their picks, and they should have gone with Isaiah Simmons. The film on him, guys, Pastell and I watched it the night before. Unbelievable. It's some of the best film I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah,
I think, and I'm with you on Simmons. I think the challenge for Simmons is going to be he has to be in the right defensive system in order to be used correctly. I'm all about hybrid guys. I'm all about guys that can do it all. The challenge from a defensive perspective is that they'll always kind of be second guessing, right? If a team racks up 400 yards, the question is, did I do the right thing, right? Did I put Isaiah Simmons in the right spot? Did I utilize him correctly? And I think there just may be a lot of second guessing, at least from a defensive perspective. But there's no doubt. I mean, for him there at 8 to still be on the board, I thought was an absolute steal for the Cardinals. Now for you, Pastell, you don't have to go far for your first round steal. A lot of guys thought that this guy could have been the number 1 pick in the draft if Joe Burrow did not have the season that he had at LSU.
Yeah, so Tua. I mean, I think he's the biggest steal because when healthy, people were talking the whole tank for Tua. People were talking about him being potentially the number 1 pick in this draft and a franchise-changing quarterback. So either he's healthy or he's not. So he passed his physicals. So because he passed his physicals, he should have been the 3rd, 4th. I mean, someone should have traded up and got him. But the fact that the Dolphins didn't have to trade their draft capital is phenomenal. And the fact that they were able to keep all 3 first-round picks is another reason why it was the biggest steal. Because they were able to sit there at 5 and get that game-changing quarterback without having to trade up. And there was only 2 this year. There was only Joe Burrow and there was only Tua. Everyone else was kind of like the next best. So I think it's just as simple as that. They didn't have to trade any of the draft capital, and they got a game-changing, franchise-changing quarterback. As far as my biggest guy that I don't think biggest reach, I'd argue, was Andrew Thomas, and I think. Yeah, so the Giants needed a left tackle. There's no doubt about it. So you got to keep Daniel Jones upright. You got to keep him healthy. But if you're picking in the top 5, you got to get an all-pro, if not Pro Bowl type of talent. And when you have guys like Isaiah Simmons there on the board, I don't think you pass on him. Andrew Thomas is a good athlete, but I think there was 5 other tackles just as good. Now, would they have been there in the second round? I don't know. Josh Jones was. I mean, they could have picked him in the second, but you never know who's going to fall. I just think they reached on him a little bit. I just don't think you should ever reach if you're in the top 5.
Yeah, I agree, and especially with a left tackle, I don't like taking a left tackle in the top 5 unless he's a 5-star prospect. And some people may argue that he was. I'm with you, Pastell. I do not think. I think out of all the tackles, he may be one of the more. I think he's a solid left tackle, but I don't think that he's going to be an all-pro. So it would be interesting, but the Giants had a clear need, to keep Daniel Jones upright. They've really struggled on the offensive line for years. So I like where they went, but I'm with you, Pasto. I didn't think they got the right guy there. Now, as far as me, as far as I'm concerned, the steal, I'm with Kenny. I went with Isaiah Simmons for him to be there at 8. I thought Cliff Kingsbury probably just sitting there, just jumping up and down in his, $5
awesome
million
house.
apartment, in his house. His house was so baller. I couldn't believe they were showing that. That guy was just just crushing life. He's just crushing life. I think Isaiah Simmons there, I'm not going to kind of beat a dead horse there. The most versatile player in the draft to be there at 8, and especially to kind of help the Cardinals there in that division. The talent-wise, it's there. But I think that from a defensive coordinator's perspective, that week to week, his responsibilities are going to change, right? And is it the right responsibility, or is it going to be? Is he always going to be in the right spot for what they need him to do? I think that's going to be the challenge there. But certainly the talent to fall to 8, that's the right one. As far as the reach here, my biggest reach, and this is going to be the next segment we go into, is for the entire draft. But one to take note of. It's not my biggest reach in the draft, but just in the one of the 2 in the first round. Clavon Chason, Jags picked him at 18, edge rusher. As I mentioned earlier
20.
here in this pod, not a deep draft when it came to edge rushers, aside from Chase Young. I think that Chazon's physical abilities are certainly there. The problem is his production. Just don't think he was a very productive player. I thought that all the highlights that you saw on all the draft coverage is pretty much all of the highlights that he had in his career at LSU. Riddled by injury as well, so he's not the most durable guy. And Kenny, I'll kind of kick it over to you. I don't really know if the Jags have done very well picking edge rushers in the first round in recent years either.
Well, my Jags haven't really done well picking in the first round at any position in the past 10 years, hardly ever, except for maybe Jalen Ramsey. But it's. I
thought it was a reach. I thought it was a reach. I think that the Jags could have gone in another position group, but I think taking a clear drop in an edge rusher at 18, even though it was a need, I don't know if it was good value.
Yeah,
that's why I thought it was a reach.
Yeah, to pick Chasen at 20 was definitely a bit of a reach in my opinion. I don't know if it was necessarily a reach. He probably went where he probably should have gone, but I just didn't think it was a great fit for the Jags. But looking back at the Jags' entire draft, that was their strategy. That's what they did. If you look at almost all 12 of the Jaguars' draft picks, except for Jake Luton, the quarterback, they're all guys who have massive ceilings and untapped potential. Like, they're athletic freaks, but they might not necessarily have the production to go along with it. I mean, but everybody they picked was highly athletic guys that, again, you read the reports and you hear the scouting reports on them are, this guy has this, he's the ability, if he taps into his athletic potential, he learns technique. If he learns how to play the game the right way, he's going to be a multi-year Pro Bowler. And that's exactly what Clavon Chasen is. I'm interested to see what he can do if he's healthy, if he grows and learn and into his athletic ability and his skill set. So I do think with what was on the board, it was a little bit of a reach, but at 20, I think they could have gone probably Epinenza or Justin Jefferson or Yetur Gross-Matos. I would have been happy with any of those guys. Maybe the top offensive lineman on the board probably would have been a better pick. But again, it just fits what the Jags did the entire draft. A lot of high upside guys, a lot of high ceiling guys, and also a lot of low floor guys. It's going to be one or the other. We're going to look back at this draft and say they either hit on a lot of guys or they swung and missed on a lot of guys.
For sure. All right, guys, lightning round. Last thing here to end our episode as far as all of our draft grades and draft thoughts. So I want you guys to go through biggest steal in the entire draft and biggest reach of the entire draft. So Pastell, I'll go ahead and kick it off to you.
So I don't want to beat a dead horse, I guess. The biggest reach was Andrew Thomas. I really do believe that. So I'm just going to, for everything we just said, I'm going to leave it at that. The biggest steal in the draft is Josh Jones. I think those two guys I just said, Andrew Thomas and Josh Jones, there wasn't that much of a difference. Yes, Andrew Thomas was a better prospect, but Josh Jones was not far behind him. And Arizona Cardinals got him in the third round. And what makes this pick so much better is that everyone thought Arizona was going to go offensive tackle in the first round. Instead, they got one of the best players in the draft in Simmons, like we've just mentioned. And then they come back and get a first-round talent in Josh Jones in the third round. I mean, that's a steal of the draft.
It is. Yeah. There's no doubt about it. That's why they were on one of my best draft lists, for sure. Kenny, how about you?
Antonio Gibson was the biggest steal in the entire draft to me. He went to the Washington Redskins in the third round.
Let's go.
I'm absolutely head over heels for this guy. 6'2", 221. Blazer, runs a sub 4.40 and has production to go with it. I watched a lot of Memphis games this year. AAC games were in the house a lot this Saturday. And man, he had 12 total touchdowns and only like 60 some touches. So the guy seems to score on almost every play. He's a dynamic kick return. I know kick return is not a big deal in the NFL anymore, but he's dynamic at returning kicks. He's a guy that the Redskins are going to give the ball to 12 to 15 times a game, whether that's out of the backfield because he played running back and receiver at Memphis. He reminds me a lot of Antonio Brown coming out of Central Michigan. Maybe not as polished as a receiver, but just that type of dynamic playmaker. But he's bigger. This guy is going to absolutely be a game changer for the Washington Redskins offense and really help Dwayne Haskins improve as his second year in the league. Biggest reach, and again, like Pascal said, not trying to beat a dead horse, A.J. Dillon. I don't think you can justify picking AJ Dillon in the second round. He's a very limited running back. He's very limited at what he can do. He doesn't fit with what NFL teams are trying to do in offenses right now, in the offense revolution in the NFL. I just think the Packers are going to have a very hard time utilizing his skills, and he's going to have a really hard time living up to that draft pick in the second round.
Yeah, I think we talked about him a lot earlier. But Kenny, I agree with you, Antonio Gibson. I thought he was a huge steal for the Redskins, and me being a Redskins fan, we just need dudes, right?
Yep.
We need dudes who can take the rock and take it to the house, and we don't have many of those. So that's why I was really excited for that third round pick. So I think he was one of the biggest steals. I go through mine pretty quick. As far as the reach, I mentioned him a little bit earlier. Isaiah Wilson, the other tackle from Georgia, taking 29 by the Titans in the first round. I thought he was a huge. I thought this was a huge reach here, clear project. 6'6", 360. He may actually bump in to be more of a guard at the end of the day, unless he kind of slims up a little bit. I thought this was a reach for a team that's on the cusp of going to the Super Bowl last year. Thought they could have done more at pick number 29. Guys, the biggest steal of the draft, though, I told you guys over text message, I can't believe that this guy fell here. The Ravens brass was completely stunned that he was available here. J.K. Dobbins going to the Ravens, biggest steal in the entire draft. In my opinion, from the running back position, he was the only home run threat you could draft. And when I mean a home run threat, I mean a guy who could take the rock at 5 yards deep on a zone read play, an inside zone, an outside zone, and he can make anybody miss. He can also lower his shoulder. He can hit a hole. In my opinion, he was the best running back prospect in the draft, and he fell all the way to the Ravens. He's an absolute perfect fit for what they're going to do. And guys, Ravens going to score 1,000 points next year because I don't know who you key on. Right? If you sit there and you're sitting there and you're going to try to start Lamar Jackson, you've got a legit home run threat in J.K. Dobbins. I would also make the case that J.K. Dobbins could potentially win Rookie of the Year, Offensive Rookie of the Year in the NFL, because he's going to get a lot of carries in that offense because everybody's going to be looking to stop it. And it's all option-based, option reads with Lamar Jackson, and Dobbins going to get a ton of carries. I couldn't believe that he fell to the Ravens there. Again, that's my potential Rookie of the Year pick as well. Biggest steal in the entire draft.
And the one great thing about Dobbins is he wasn't necessarily my top running back on the board, but it's a good fit because of where he came from at Ohio State, like playing with a very similar player in Justin Fields. So he knows how to play and key off of a quarterback like Lamar. So it's going to be a dual threat kind of guy. So it's going to be very interesting to see what the Ravens. But the Ravens draft well every year, so it's not surprising.
That's true.
Yeah, I also think watch out a year away. Watch out for the AFC North. You got guys like Joe Burrow, Baker Mayfield, Lamar Jackson. All I'm saying is watch out because this division I think is going to be very dangerous in a year from now.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I'll give a couple other notes for the draft as we close up here, guys. The quarterbacks, as far as where they went, Jacob Eason went to the 4th to the Colts. I actually think that's a pretty decent fit for him. He needs another year or two to learn, and I think being behind Brissett and Phillip Rivers with their times kind of coming close, I think it's a pretty good fit there. Another note, the New England Patriots did not take a quarterback at all, so they will be riding with Jarrett Stidham and Brian Hoyer going into the year, so it'll be very interesting to see how that situation turns out. Those are kind of the two bigger notes that I had going on. Mm-hmm. And thanks to everybody out there. I thought it was an incredible weekend of NFL. All 3 days were great. ESPN, as we mentioned earlier, ABC, all the NFL partners did a fantastic job with all of the constraints that we had. Again, guys, this is Prospects 101 podcast. Please follow us on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. We'll be dropping an episode a week, if not multiple episodes, where we'll be covering everything from prospects at the high school level, draft class, recruiting classes, all the way to college prospects that are getting ready for the NFL. And guys, with the NFL draft, it's really kind of our Super Bowl, so it kind of makes sense that we start off on a high note. So expect a lot of great content coming out, guys. Here in the coming months, we'll be releasing our branding this week, which is extremely exciting. And fellas, I'm excited to see where this journey leads us.